things, these concepts that don't translate into English. There's no one word. We can try, you put together a whole string of words and try to somehow invoke the meaning, but a lot of this stuff doesn't translate. When we're talking about yoga, we're talking about something that doesn't translate into words. It's talking about a language that doesn't translate into words. That words, and this is the empowering, really beautiful piece of the practice, because there's these kind of stages of practice, and at first we're trying to get into the practice, and then what happens is a lot of times we get the practice and we grab it and we say, this is my practice, I'm a yogi, this is mine, this is the way it should be done, this is the right way, and that's the wrong way. Those people are practicing wrong, I'm practicing right, this is it, right? Or am I practicing right? We look, what's the right way to practice, and we seek that out. And so at this stage, it's completely obscured what we're doing. What's happening here? All of these practices are to point to something which is not limited, which is beyond the practice itself. So the practice is not the goal. Does that make sense? The practice is to awaken us to something that's beyond the limitations of the practice. And so there's like what Confucius said. He said, don't look at the finger. The finger's pointing. It's pointing to the moon. Don't look at the finger. It's pointing to the moon. Same thing as we're doing this asana, pranayama, meditation, all of these things. Don't pay too much attention to the details of the finger. It's pointing somewhere. And so if we can catch that, that's where we have, I've seen this a couple times, I'm going to share this. But a couple of my teachers who've spent a big part of a lifetime teaching traditional practices in the most precise way and the most true way that they could this has happened to two people recently, where they have kind of like an existential crisis and they're like, holy smokes, I'm carrying around this rigid way, I'm doing all of these things, but I'm a being. I'm a free being. I don't need this mantle anymore. I don't need this practice anymore. I don't need this set way. What it's pointing to is right here. Doesn't matter how we dress. It doesn't matter, there's many ways to pray. There's many ways to be aware. And so it's good to keep this in mind as we're doing these practices, as we're going through learning these practices, and we're going to be looking at the details of it, and we're going to be saying, what is the correct alignment, and what is, how can I shift, and all of that stuff, and it's all good. And it's pointing at something. That's the purpose. It's pointing at something. The meditation, these stories, Purusha and Prakriti, these stories that we tell, the philosophy, all of this stuff is not the point. It's pointing at something. What's it pointing at? Again, words is such an obstacle, but right now, as Patanjali's first word, he said, now. 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 And goes on to say more, and it's good, because if someone just says now, you're like, now what? now what? What are you saying? Now? What? It's confusing. And so then these words, they come in, and it begins to tell this story. But the best way, the most direct way to say it is now. Now, even we start to say, your life. And we're already swept up in a story. Your, mine. Immediately, we're caught up in this whole story, all these values and all of this stuff that comes from that life. So now is a pretty good way to say it. Now, sat, it's self-evident. Now, it's self-evident. We can't say any more than that.